In this session, we'll be talking about Beingful Leadership, because in the end, the rubber has to meet the road, and it meets the road through leadership. Leadership is especially necessary now in these changing times when the world has gone topsy-turvy around us, when there's so much disruption. This is when we need leaders. And I don't mean those, high and mighty leaders that stand up on a hill and tell everyone, but it's really leadership at an individual level. All of us can be leaders, self-leadership, without looking for that savior. Those days are long gone. So really it's the leadership of individuals, ordinary individuals, leading their lives in a beingful way. And then the question comes, how do you recognize these leaders? How do you know a beingful leader? And I wrote a book some years ago on it, and there were a number of people I was surprised by who would not seem like leaders. But then as you dig deeper, as you talk to the people who report to them, as you talk to them, the kind of humility that comes through, the integrity that comes through, the kind of awareness of the world around them, the ability to distance themselves from themselves, which is called self-distancing, to be at a level removed from themselves. And that again in ancient Indian wisdom was about being the witness. Anchor in your witness to see the other part of you, the everyday, the part of you, the empirical self, that struggles and gets angry and all those things associated with living in this world. But I do want to ask you, Pavitra, in your experience, you must have come across leaders you liked and didn't like.
Yes.
What was it? What you don't have to name names, but
Yeah.
someone you liked. What did you see in that person?
I think that the one thing that stands out to me the most is that this person, that a good leader that I had in the past, was someone I could approach very easily with any concerns. It wasn't related just to my work. I was able to even talk to him about losing interest in the work that he had given me and wanting to do more than that. And I think that kind of acceptance really helped me think a little more about where I wanted to go. And I would say that he inadvertently led me to leave the job eventually and look for something I liked.
And he didn't mind it?
He didn't mind it. No,
Wow.
he allowed for that kind of openness.
letting go.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And he also realized it was more like a collaboration than me reporting to him. So that
Absolutely.
was very, very helpful.
And you've identified really this is the kind of leadership, this kind of openness. And that kind of detachment might mean that you leave his group, but his willingness to care about you, the being,
Yes.
the human being,
Yes.
not the one who's reporting to you,
Yes.
not the one who has to get work done.
Right.
And it turns out research has shown that that kind of concern for the other person, in a sense being a coach, right? Being a coach for the other
Yes.
person,
Yes.
helping the other person in terms of a career, what is the right thing to do. That is the number one leadership capability, being a coach, a competence. Google has done research on that the best leaders now are the ones who coach their subordinates. What else did you find in that person? Was there a kind of integrity or honesty?
Yes, more than any of that, he was very willing to have conversations about what he lacked or what he wasn't able to do. And it seemed like he was going through his own learning journey along with you. They were parallel journeys. And he was willing to talk about that and share those learnings with me as well. So that was very helpful to see them as human as
Human
you
beings,
are. Yeah.
vulnerable in a way.
Yes,
right?
yes,
Being
yes.
they're not
So
these
that was-
kinds of perfect beings.
No.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. No, those are, see, you identified some things that I think are essential being full of. This self-awareness,
Right.
the ability to be honest and
Yes.
perhaps some humility,
Yes.
maybe some level of humility
Yes,
there.
yes.
These are all critical.
Yes.
Yeah, and the ability to see other people around them as human beings. In the end, beingfulness is about being human. It is that ability to see other people as human, and not
Right.
just human, but as living beings.
Right.
That many of us forget it.
Right.
We get trapped in charisma. We get trapped in this notion of leaders who are really, they tell you what to do. They
Yes,
drive the role
powerful
models.
and yes.
So speaking of which, have you come across leaders of the other kind of?
Yes.
What,
Yes.
and how? Again, without naming names, what
Yes.
was the experience like with them?
I think some things again that stood out were obvious bias, not really giving you the opportunity to share your story, but and then very focused on how valuable are you to my team in terms of the outcomes, and if you aren't, then don't waste my
Don't
time.
waste my time.
Almost, yes.
Really? Yeah.
And the lack of mentorship, I felt
Right.
like that was very, very obvious, especially because these were the earlier times in my career and I needed mentorship.
Right.
But not having enough time to spend time, like just teach me how to do
Right.
things.
Right.
These were some major things that stood out. And also the way I think you communicate, whether it is a lot of negative communication, a lot of negative words being used in the community.
Criticizing, putting you down. those kind
Yes,
of
and
things.
willing to talk badly about others in front of you, which makes you think that they must be doing the same thing with me.
Absolutely.
So yes, these were some things.
Interesting. And this is so common, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, it is very, very,
very
common.
It's unfortunate that it's more common than the other kind of leadership.
Yes.
Yeah, when I talk to, I've had those experiences myself, and when I talk to many of my students, they say similar things. You mentioned mentorship. That is so important at the early stage of your life. Mentoring is so important because that sets the kinds of standards in a way.
Right.
If the wrong standards are set, then you become like them.
Right.
So I think any manager, if they say, what do I lead? I don't have large teams.
Right.
Even if you have one person,
Right.
an entry-level person, that's an opportunity for leadership.
Right.
By mentoring.
Yes.
And then what you were saying, talking behind your back, and
Yes.
that shows perhaps a lack of an insecurity internally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or
How did that come through?
it looked more than insecurity as the lack of maturity, because it's not something that you expect out of people where you're sitting with them and they're talking about your colleague, and not in a very positive way.
Right.
You probably don't want to know those things about them.
And you know that you'll be the other,
yes.
they'll be talking about you.
Yes, and then that makes you wonder. So then you go and there is groupism encouraged. You start talking to people, asking them what he's saying, and all of those kinds of things. And more than anything, it encourages an atmosphere of fear, because you're constantly making sure you're not messing up, so that you're not penalized for it.
It's like
later.
walking on glass all the time, right?
Yes. No space for mistakes at all.
Yes.
So that,
these are exactly the things not to do as a being.
Right.
Give room for people, encourage them. And it comes down to enabling them to express themselves fully and not penalize, and the kind of divisions you're talking about.
Yes.
Fear is definitely the opposite of beingful. Beingful leadership is hopeful, it's positive, it allows a positive development. It's not easy. Everyone's subject to pressures. The fact that you have come across some managers like this, and I've also come across, I've been inspired by many people, people in, I don't want to name names, of course, these are wonderful people, but they had that kind of, and you mentioned something very critical, they didn't think of you as a resource.
Right.
They thought of you as a human being.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You're not just some resource to be moved here and there.
You're not a number.
Not a number.
Yes.
Not a number.
Yes.
Not for my use.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a very important ethical issue. That, it's the deontological perspective where you are important in your own right. Not that you are important because you're useful for me. Those ethics of usage, how useful you are for me, is called a utilitarian. And we are sick and tired of these kinds of utilitarian things, right? We are not numbers to be used in someone else's aggregates.
Right.
So these are some of the underpinnings of beingful leadership, treating others like human beings, bringing out the best in them, mentoring them, and being yourself. As you mentioned, you're going on a journey yourself, and bringing other people along, being at some level vulnerable, and caring about them. Because this seems like a tall order.
Right.
What do you feel? Is this something that...
I think that it is very natural to be these things, but then the
Very
titles and roles that you're given limit you in those things.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think that in the workplace, it's a lot harder to show caring without seeming like you're too invested in somebody or you're weak. Yes, so there was always this, especially with the leaders that I wasn't very inspired by, there was a clear division of we can't be friends.
Right.
And they were
Because
very,
if we
very
are,
careful.
what happens?
Because if we are, then I might
Yeah.
show favoritism, or it
You'll
might
take
go
advantage
beyond.
of me.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
it will become an emotional transaction rather than a
Right.
work-related.
Which they fear.
Which they fear.
Fear.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, you make a very good point there that
Yeah.
in some ways, it's interesting you said that this is your natural expression, what we
Yes.
discussed, but
Yes.
other things get in the way.
Yes.
In fact,
Yes.
the way we created our organizations, our models of leadership,
Yes.
our work arrangements,
Yes.
expectations,
Yes.
they're really things to take out of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It reminds me, and I'm often reminded of verses from the Upanishads. It reminds me of another beautiful verse in the Isha Upanishad, and it's an invocation to the sun. Pushanne karshe yamasurya prajapatya vyuharashmin samuha tejo yatte rupam kalyanatamam. And it says, and this is the part that I really like, hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tatvam pusanna pavranu satya dharmaya drishtaye.
Okay.
What it means is you, this great God, the sun God, remove that bright shining disk so that when you uncover it, then I can see who you really are. And who you really are is nothing but me. It's as if there's a lid that has been covered, that is really covering that essence.
Right.
And in some ways, I think Beingful Leadership is an attempt to remove that lid.
Right.
That lid of appearances.
Right. Right.
The appearing self. You're supposed to appear like this tough guy, the one who can control, no emotions, cold calculus of decision making, all that, right? So that's at some level Beingful Leadership is remove that lid of appearances
Right.
that get in the way. Yeah.
So would you say then that a beingful lead, somebody who wants to be a beingful leader, should not be driven only by results?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's you make a very important point. I do believe that if you're intrinsically driven, doing things for their own sake, you achieve better results. I've seen it in my own life. If you just set results up, most people try and just hit those results. Their heart is not in it. They're not fully engaged. Maybe the results were not really great to begin with. So I think this results-oriented culture is a big problem.
Okay.
It's again a very utilitarian culture.
Right. Right.
We are more than results. We are how we get the work done, the quality, the intrinsic experience of it. When do we get engaged? Because we like that work. And so that is very critical. So when you
Okay.
become intrinsically motivated, doing it for its own sake, of course it's hard.
Right.
Then you do even better than results. And even if you don't, at least you spent your life doing things that you cared about.
Right.
So when you look back, and this goes back to the issue of on your deathbed, what happens on a deathbed? I don't know if you've had the chance to. Has anyone close to you, perhaps a grandparent, passed away in your life?
Yes. Yes.
Do you
Recently.
want to mind what
Yeah.
was the, again, you don't need to,
No.
what were they talking about in the last few days?
I think my grandmother passed away last year, and she was someone who was very, very worried about the way people saw her and the image the idea that people had about her. But very weirdly to me, because I'd only known her that way as someone who was very worried about the way she was being perceived. When she was dying and we knew she was dying, all she cared about were the people around her and
Wow.
if how we will be once
Yeah.
she goes,
Yeah.
and if we'll be able to take the death.
Yeah.
And that was that almost selflessness
Right.
was very different from how she was
From the appearing-
normally. Yes, somebody who was
Very
so
interesting.
self-conscious.
Very interesting.
So yes, that was
Yeah,
something
very
that stood out.
interesting. So that goes back again to what we're saying that
Yes.
when things really come down to the crunch, right? Death, of course, is the ultimate.
Yes,
You go back to that core part of you,
Yes.
which is about care.
care. Yes,
It's not about appearances. It's not about results.
Right.
I've been in these near-death settings a couple of times, and in each of them, I realized I did not think of outcomes. I did not think of my achievements. I didn't think of what I achieved, what did not achieve. Results were the last thing I thought of. I thought of my wife, my children, my close friends, and if I lived my life fully, did I live the potential in me? Did I
Right.
express it fully?
right.
The quality of my life, not
Right.
the quantity of my life. So it tells us that results are again artificially imposed. It's that lid that needs to be removed
Yes,
to get to your grandmother's example is
yes,
it's not about what others think about you.
yes.
It's about care.
It's about care.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
care is a fundamental dimension of Beingful Leadership. Care and being go hand in hand. That, this care that connects us,
Right.
that is very critical. So yes, long answer to your question. Results only one small piece of the entire thing. Far more important is the experience of it. Did you do it for its own sake, intrinsic
Right.
motivation?
Right.
Again, very difficult. And the reason why all these are difficult is because we are schooled in a different way. Going up and going through classes, I'm sure you must have been. You're a topper in your right. But was this something growing up? I need to get the best grades and so on. Was that part of your?
Not a part of my upbringing, but a
Okay.
part of the way that I started to see I almost perceived people who topped as people who were successful, and I mixed up those ideas. But now it's becoming obviously a little more clear to me
Right.
that
But for a lot of people, it's not. Right.
yes, yes,
People who top, people get the best grades, people who make the most money, people who do well, all these numbers oriented,
yes,
they're the people to aspire to.
yes,
That's where it starts.
yes,
When we're young, these expectations are set, and that becomes the system that we have to throw away. It
right,
doesn't come easy. Yeah, no, it's really, I think, yes, it's hard because there are all these layers imposed on us by
Yes.
society, by schools, by parents, that you then have to, and in many ways, that is liberation.
right,
We talk of moksha, ancient wisdom talks of moksha. In my mind, that is moksha, liberating yourself from these fetters of what others expect of you. And at some level, going to your core and realizing what is true. What you said, if we didn't have these fetters, we would naturally be this way.
right,
We would
right,
be caring.
right,
We would be, interested in the quality of what we're doing.
right.
So it's that. I think liberation is exactly that. So Beingful Leadership hopefully allows people in your group to express themselves in a way that is liberating for them. And it's called flourishing. They flourish.
So one last question on being
Sure.
for leadership is, I realize that you did not talk about technical expertise
Yes.
while defining a being for leader.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
would you say that's not important, or it's not the most important
Well,
thing?
so it is important.
Right.
In this world, you cannot live without understanding technology.
Right,
But it's more to do with how you see technology and what its uses are.
right, right,
It's not technical leadership for its own sake,
Right.
but technology for what purpose?
right,
And that applies to everything.
Right.
Technology, the ability to tell stories, the ability to write well, the ability to analyze. Analytics is another one. So those are tools. And technology is can be misused or can be used well.
right,
So Beingful Leadership would talk about the good uses of technology. And the good uses would be to reduce inequality, reduce the negative impacts, allow people to flourish in their work settings. So yes, that's very critical.
okay,
And especially as artificial intelligence becomes important. And we'll
Right.
cover that in another
Yes,
session. But yes.
Okay.
So it's really the uses of technology.
right,
And there is some work here. When in the 1930s and 40s, there was some concern that there was a technological imperative, that the world was being driven. It's true. Andreessen said software is eating the world. You could argue that it's not just eating the world, it's eating us, right? Eating away at us. So yeah, ensuring that it doesn't come at the cost of our being. It's not, so that's very important.
okay,
So yeah, that's,
okay.
yeah.